Hi, this is Ann with the Learn and Grow Educational Series. I'm here in our new Virtual Sustainability Learning Center in Test Garden just to introduce this space to you and explain our plans for this space and what we have coming up in the near future and over the next few years in terms of the evolution of our instruction. So today's video is to introduce this space to you and tell you about what we're planning to do. So a lot of the people that I already know have been asking me, what in the world made you think to do this? I've been trying to do something along these lines for some time. Back in 2018, we thought we had the opportunity to start an in-person sustainability learning center out on a private property out in Wrightwood, California, right on the snow line between where the Angeles National Forest transitions into the Mojave Desert. And even still, you know, we have every intention of going back out to that incredible geography, that incredible landscape, and still doing something, potentially with the same property owner that we were working with before, but things changed and we had to roll with those changes, and so now this is where we're at right now. And then on top of that came the pandemic and the resulting shutdown. And so now we have to deal with how we're going to provide our instruction and not let the shutdown be a barrier to our providing the instruction is really rather one of the reasons why we do it. And so I just want to recap, you know, what the Learn and Grow Educational Series is actually all about and why we are providing this instruction and how we're amending our instruction to go primarily online right now just because that's what the situation calls for. The nature of the reason why we have to push our instruction online goes to why our instruction is even important in the first place. And so I'm going to be talking about how all of these things interrelate with each other as I go forward through this video. I had been doing a whole lot of program development and design around an in-person learning center. We can get to that, and all of that work that's been done, it can sit on the shelf and wait until it becomes ripe and timely again. That's not anything that will go to waste in the long run. And we have such big visions for what we want to do with Learn and Grow and the degree to which we want to make it a global instructional program that empowers people to be self-reliant and self-sufficient to the degree that they're able to based on their availability of resources and based on their just where they're physically located and being able to adapt to their circumstances. I mean, that's one of the things that makes human beings so unique as a species is our ability to adapt to almost any environment, to almost any circumstance through tool use. You know, a friend of mine once said, and I take this very deeply to heart, that we aren't harming the earth. The earth will survive without us. The earth survived being hit by asteroids and meteors and stuff in its earliest days of formation. The dinosaurs were taken out by an extinction level event that was natural. My point being is that what we are doing to the earth right now isn't destroying it. We're destroying the ability of the earth to support the form of life that we are. We are making ourselves extinct, not the planet. So we've now already changed our planet irreparably, forever. And we now have to find a way to strike a balance in such a way that we don't inadvertently eliminate ourselves, that we don't eliminate the planet's ability to support the type of life that we are. When it comes to conservation and being environmentally conservative and being responsible with the resources that we use so that we don't exhaust our resources and that we don't pollute the spaces that we would otherwise occupy such that they no longer are habitable. This is the balance that we need to strike. And so that takes knowledge, that takes an understanding of where we stand in the greater scheme of things and where we lie in the pecking order of basically the food chain, that where we exist in this hierarchy and this organization of all of the life forms on this planet and how we all balance each other out. And so the more that we understand that really is truly the application of science to solving real world problems, the more that we understand where we stand with respect to the rest of creation, with the rest of nature, now we know what we need to do. But we have to arrive at that understanding, and not enough of us are there yet, which is the whole point of this instruction. You can't teach what you don't know. You can't expect generations to pass on knowledge to the next generation when the first generation didn't possess it in the first place. And so this isn't just about course correcting, it's also about informing in a preventive way how to prepare our children for what's to come, that they have achieved enough knowledge and skill development that whatever new challenges come their way, they're able to roll with it. And So this is about not only educating the present, but also educating the future based on what we've learned from the past. We tried to master nature. We tried to assume that we could overcome it and that we're not part of it. And the fact that we can be reduced to the situation we are in now by not even a single-celled organism. Viruses don't have reproductive systems. They don't have digestive systems. So a form of life that is so primitive that it has to symbiotically attach itself to other life forms in order to feed and reproduce is still powerful enough to take us down. And so the very idea that we are that powerful and that we're the most powerful species on the planet is just plainly foolish. We're now in this place where, a lot of us are engaging in a whole lot of in-depth soul searching and hard thinking about, okay, what do I really want to be participating in here? And with all the political things that have been going on in this country, what side of history do I really want to be on in all of this? And do I want to be on the side that comes up with solutions, or do I want to be on the side that tears everything down and just destroys things in frustration because adapting to change is too hard? And so we have to adapt to change to survive. That's just the way all life is, regardless of whether it's human life or any other form. And so the bigger life lessons that we're trying to teach through Learn and Grow really do come back down to how do we use all of the academic knowledge that we pursue and obtain to make real life work better for us collectively as a species, and for us to live more harmoniously with all of God's creation, with all of nature, with everything that we have been given. How do we do this well? A lot of that's been learned, unfortunately, through trial and error, and we've seen a lot of suffering and loss occur by people making ill-informed mistakes. And what's frustrating for some of us is to see people making ill-informed mistakes when the rest of us knew totally well that that was not going to work, because we are not ill-informed. We're well-informed. And so we need to get to the point where the majority of our species, the overwhelming majority of our species, is as well-informed as it can be, because only a well-informed populace can make collective decisions effectively. Only a well-informed populace can function as a democracy. This is why education is so important, and that's why these types of programs and what we add to the public domain with our YouTube content and social media is so important, along with the voices of everybody else who's speaking to these issues. Because if we who understand these things can collectively share our information with those who don't. And the same thing goes for all the things that those of us who know this body of knowledge well, there's tons of other things that we don't understand, that we have to rely on other people who are more knowledgeable than us to inform us of these things. And this goes to some very basic concepts in educational psychology. Vaccae psychology in particular comes to mind, where Lev Vygotsky made the point that as much as it is human nature to try and figure things out and learn independently based on what's available, what's called constructivist learning, and something that Piaget observed early on, Vygotsky made the observation that learning becomes much more powerful and stronger. You build more skills more quickly when you actually have someone more knowledgeable come along and model and teach it to you. Vygotskian psychology basically supports the reason why teaching and instruction is so important. Teaching has always been an instrumental part in fostering our development as a society and as a culture, regardless of what society or culture we belong to. All of us recognize, regardless of where we come from, the value of teaching. The only thing Vygotskian psychology gives us is a scientific framework to understand why it's so effective and why it's so important and how to do it well. And so this is stuff that we bring to the table in developing our content for Learn and Grow, whether it's informal kinds of things or things that don't look very formal but are actually very intricately designed, that we present through our social media content, that it may not come across as an actual lesson plan, but that doesn't mean that there isn't an instructional message behind it. Everything that we're doing is instructional in nature. This is why we developed our virtual learning center. This is why we want to go ahead and continue to expand upon our instruction as we've intended to all along. We've been doing this food security piece forever, but the sustainable living piece has been something that we've been having difficulty starting. I may live up in the house for real, because there's a house up on the hill that's behind the camera, and this is just a back little corner of the property where I have set up this project. But this is a incredible space to be able to do this project. And I've had the garden and the chickens here, as you've known, for the last year and a half, if you've been following Learn and Grow for a while. Basically what I'm accomplishing here with this is a number of things, and it's not just for our instruction, though that is a long overdue piece that I've been wanting to do forever, that I now have the power to do. This also solves several other problems for me as well. I've had the garden here for the last year and a half, and it's been this trek up and down the hill from the house for me to come down here and do all of this, being able to move my work production down here and be able to set up a remote field office down here so that I can do my regular job gives me oversight over this space and control over this space, and it's a far more efficient use of my time than having to go back and forth. So that right there solved a problem for me work-wise. The other consideration is that the owner of the property, my long-term friend, I mean, we're basically family at this point, Sherry, who owns all of this, she works with elderly people in their homes who have Alzheimer's and other health conditions. These are the people who are the most vulnerable for a COVID infection. This is also part of our isolation strategy, that if I have to get out of the house and I can't be around her because we're concerned about some kind of cross-contamination issue, I've got to be able to keep her as isolated from me as possible until we get to the point where we can get vaccinated and we're not worried about it anymore. We had to come up with a strategy to deal with that anyway, and so the fact that I needed to have a space where I could do this kind of instruction dovetailed in with a far more pressing health-related need. So basically what this has allowed me to do is to create a space where I can address this COVID concern without worrying about, what's going to happen if, that we've got a contingency, and that makes me feel just so much better about that, just knowing that we've got a backup plan. But the other part of it is now I've got this incredible workspace where I can come down here and deal with some of the really gnarly public policy issues that I'm having to deal with in my work outside of Learn and Grow as a special education and disability resource advocate. And for those of you who are new to Learn and Grow and new to me, my primary line of work is working with families of children with special needs and helping them navigate the bureaucracy of all of these publicly funded programs that are created by the rule of law to serve them. These are taxpayer funded by all of us to make sure that these individuals get the help that they need. So this is what I've been doing for the last almost 30 years. The government is required to abide by the laws that created it and regulate it and fund it. And now that this pandemic has hit, and now that the schools are shut down, and because the pandemic is still not under control and the schools are still shut down, what we are seeing in terms of special education non-compliance is on par with where we were in the mid-70s when the laws had to be passed in the first place. Because the laws were only passed because people were doing bad things under the color of public office. We now again have people doing egregiously horrible things under the color of public office and using the pandemic as their excuse to deny people their civil and educational rights, as though somehow democracy has fallen and we're in the midst of the apocalypse, and all of a sudden the government is now prevented from actually upholding its mandated duties, which is ludicrous. That's my life. That is what I've been dealing with ever since the shutdown started back in March, on top of everything that I'm doing with Learn and Grow and all of the food insecurity issues that we're now dealing with. That now 1 in 4 children in this country is now food insecure, and those numbers could easily be underreported. Thankfully we do have some pretty decent data collection systems going on these days, and food bank numbers and food stamp applications and those kinds of things are very telling. But we also have a lot of families that are too proud to admit they need the help, and they're not asking for it. If you're still in your home and still everything looks middle class from the outside looking in, and people don't know that your bank account is overdrawn, and people don't know that you don't have the money to go to the store and buy groceries, it doesn't matter if there's food in the stores. It doesn't matter if there's not a rush on the grocery store. You can't afford to buy what's there. And so there's people in all kinds of bad situations right now that they weren't in 6 months to a year ago, who never thought that they would be in a position to have to research the kinds of issues that Learn and Grow addresses. There's going to be a whole lot of stuff that comes out of all of this in terms of, the corrective actions that are in the reforms that are going to have to take place in public education. Understanding that this is the nightmare that I'm living through right now. The ability to do my work in this peaceful, restful, beautiful space, and to create my workspace down here by the garden where I can not only keep my eye on the chickens, which is important to me because they have behavior problems. Just being down here to be able to prevent Quiet Riot from getting bullied is important to me, and to make sure that predators don't get in here or other wildlife like rats in particular coming and stealing their food. I have a problem with that, constantly engaging in pest control. So being able to police that much more effectively has been a really huge part of me moving my workspace down here. So I'm down here during the day and I can listen for things, and that's critically important to me. But it's not just that, it's also the fact that this is a therapeutic space. And everybody who has ever come into this space, whether it was just as the garden or since we've now put up the tent yurt and all of the other facilities around here, everybody who's come to check it out so far is blown away. It's a full sensory experience, and what I wish there was smell-o-vision. I wish there was a way to share the scent of the space with you right now, because we got this incredible donation of all of this free mulch that was like a juniper tree that got run through a tree chipper, and we still got mulch left over, so Sherry's going to have to get her tractor with the bulldozer bucket arm on the front end of it and scoop up this stuff and take it to other places in the property where it can be beneficial. And we've got this mulch around here, and it makes the entire place smell like an evergreen forest. You become nose blind to it after sitting here for a while, but everybody new to the space, the first thing they notice when they come into here is like, oh my gosh, it smells so good. And I like that that's the first thing they recognize. And when people start just sitting in this space or walking around this space and just relaxing over a cup of tea or whatever, you just sit here and you just look out over everything and your blood pressure just goes down. And everybody who's visited so far has had that experience, and I don't front load them. I don't say you're going to enjoy this, it's going to relax you. I don't tell them anything. I just say come on up and see what you think. And as soon as they get here, you can see within minutes their body's physically relaxing. Doing my work in this space, especially the tenseness of what I'm dealing with and the stress of what I'm dealing with, the fact that I can come in here and have that therapeutic impact, and I feel it, I'm aware of it. You know, I get stressed out, I go get Quiet Riot out of her little hutch, and I pick her up and I hold her and I give her sugars and I give her lovin's, and I'm just like, okay, I can deal with the universe now. Even with all of the scariness going on around us, including death, and including heartbreak and loss and suffering and people losing their homes and their jobs and all of these horrible things that are happening, you've got to find those places where you can still grab a moment of peace and grab a moment of beauty, and surrounding yourself and creating a space that can nurture you. However you're able to make that happen for yourself. You know, the therapeutic benefits of gardening are already scientifically proven. I don't have to harp that. I'll include references to that stuff in terms of the scientific literature in the description section below. And we already know that that's true. And we already know that it's not just a psychological thing, it's a physiological thing, that there's actual bacteria that lives in soil, that when it comes into contact with your skin, it can enter your bloodstream, which is good for you. And so one of the things people talk about growing your own food and gardening being such a satisfying and a gratifying experience, part of that is because of being exposed to the bacteria that naturally occurs in soil. We have a symbiotic relationship with soil, and we like to think somehow that we're separated from it, but we're not. That we are just as symbiotically engaged with it as any other life form. And by removing ourselves from it, we remove that beneficial relationship, that beneficial symbiosis from our natural experience, and getting more industrialized has harmed us in this way. And so getting back to doing organic gardening and creating whatever kind of food security system you can for yourself by growing your own food is going to inadvertently reintroduce those kinds of things back into your existence, and you'll benefit from it without any kind of visual anything telling you that it's there. And so it's microscopic. How would you see it? So just as bacteria and viruses can be harmful, So can some viruses and bacteria be beneficial depending on how they manifest themselves and what they actually do? For example, some bacteria can make you so sick that you'll die. But if other bacteria, if you don't have it in your intestinal tract, you can't digest your food. There's lots of things that are happening in nature that are beyond our immediate perception that affect our biological functioning, right down to mental health as well as physiological health. And separating ourselves from those things has been a very unhealthy practice, but we were unaware of them for a long time. And the science that we have done in trying to understand these organic natural systems and how they actually function has made us aware of these pieces that we've inadvertently eliminated from our lives that we actually need. I mean, what we've come to learn from trying to eliminate things from nature that we think are yucky, but then turning around and replacing them with something we think is equivalent but somehow less yucky, usually ends up being something that causes cancer, or it usually turns out to be a bad idea. If you're a person of faith, that's just how God made things. And if you're not, that's just the laws of nature. That's how the universe works. Those are the laws of physics and science. And regardless, they're the same, regardless of whether you want to call it God's law or nature's law, it's how the universe works. Facts are facts. The universe was put together in a particular kind of way so that it can function according to a set of rules. And so long as we keep trying to break those rules, all we're going to do is harm ourselves because they can't be broken. And to think that we can somehow outdo our Creator is foolish. Knowledge of how the universe works is beneficial, but the thought that we can somehow outperform it is idiotic. With all of that in mind, what Learn and Grow does is it takes the science of what is and the science of how to most effectively teach people, to get across to people what the actual facts on the ground are so they can make informed decisions for themselves. We're not telling people what to think. We're equipping them with the pieces they need in order to problem solve and think for themselves and to troubleshoot the things that they encounter in day-to-day life. You can't look ahead and plan for every possible emergency, but you can have some basic skills down and some basic guiding principles. Your guiding principle becomes the rule that you use for your problem-solving strategy. If the function of Learn and Grow is to teach people how to live sustainably and be food secure, come what may, especially given what has come and what may still come, all of us need to be more knowledgeable and more prepared to deal with these kinds of things. And it's not about having an exact replicable blueprint that everybody can copy, but to have some general guidelines of whatever I do, what does it need to include? And I think that looking at it from that framework, certainly as I was putting this space together and trying to come up with, well, if I'm going to do this, what am I going to need to have? And having that basic framework of, these are the things that I need to make sure happen in order for this to be successful, and not getting so hung up on how I'm going to make it happen. That has been a very successful strategy for me to minimize my anxiety, because I don't get hung up on it has to be exactly this way. No, it doesn't. There's more than one way to solve a problem. More often than not, it becomes what's the most accessible, efficient, and achievable way for me to pull this off with the highest likelihood of success. And so now you're talking about a math word problem. Now you're talking about applied mathematics. How much is it going to cost? How much of it am I going to need? How much of a space am I going to have to control for with whatever this solution is that I'm dealing with? You know, there's all of these logistical, measurable, empirical things that we can look at that drive all of the nuts and bolts kinds of decisions. The technical, how are we going to pull this off? Not so much the what is it that we need to achieve. So with teaching sustainable living, as much as I would love to have started out with a tiny house, that goal has by no means been eliminated, because all of this is a step in that direction. I can begin to teach you sustainable living scenarios and ideas and techniques and methodologies on this lower, more basic level, looking at sustainable glamping as opposed to sustainable living. Could somebody live like this? Sure. Is it the most comfortable way to live? Not absolutely. Is it comfortable enough that in a survival situation you could do it? Oh, sure, of course. Bottom line, this is me pitching a tent in my own backyard just to use it as a teaching space. So, am I teaching people how to live sustainably? Yeah. And do I come down here and test out this stuff and make sure that I actually know what I'm talking about and it's not just hypothetical and theoretical? Absolutely. I'm not going to teach what I don't absolutely know to be proven true. I don't believe in doing things that are purely theoretical. I believe strongly in evidence-based practices, and certainly from my work in special education, where the federal regulations actually mandate the application of the peer-reviewed research to the design and delivery of special education, that lives vividly in my mind. I advocate for that every day. I'm certainly not going to do something that's less than that in creating my own instruction. And so absolutely I'm coming down here and testing these theories and making sure that this equipment and these materials actually live up to what I'm representing, the purposes they serve. So I can still provide the instruction, but the ultimate goal is to get to the point where we've got the tiny house, and then I can demonstrate that. Because yes, I do have gray water recapturing here, 100%. Yes, I do have a composting toilet system that I can model for you here, that I can show and demonstrate it really does work and it's not disgusting. Because I want to be able to say that with authority. I don't want to just hypothesize that according to all the other YouTube videos I've seen, it's not disgusting. I want to be able to prove that it's not. And I need to prove it to myself. So all of the water that is used for any kind of the washing up that we do around here, all of it's recaptured and all of it goes into the garden. All of it is water that would have otherwise gone into the garden anyway. We just find another use for it first. There is no wastewater in this space. While I do have this cute little solar thing over here attached to the tent that you may have seen in the pictures, that's not a full-blown solar system. It does power some pretty powerful LED lights that came with it, and I can drive little small things like a space fan that I can plug in through a USB, but it doesn't power much. It's a great backup, and it's got an emergency flashlight built into it and all this other stuff, so that's really useful. But it's not a full-blown solar system. That's several $1,000s. What we ultimately want to do is replace the tent yurt with an actual tiny house, which I've already introduced that idea to you in our GoFundMe and all of that for the tiny houses in the description section below as well. And please definitely share that with everybody and anybody you think of who would support us on that, and if you're able to donate as well. But ultimately we wanted to replace the tent, which is our beginning teaching space, with the tiny house. And what the tiny house will accomplish for us is it will pull everything into one spot. Because right now what we've had to do is set up a separate area where all the water use happens and all the gray water gets recaptured, which is still convenient enough and easy enough to do to water the garden from it and everything. But it's separate from the working and the would-be living space if this were an actual living situation. So for now, the glamping space. You know, it's set up to model what we ultimately, what we're trying to teach. But the reality is that if you really were having to live in a situation like this, now you're talking about going back and forth whenever you have to go use the bathroom or take a shower or whatever. And dealing with the water is still more like camping than it is like living in a house. And so when we get to the point where we want to talk about living sustainably, full-time, permanently, we need a structure where we can teach that. I can't model that here, but I can at least get us started talking about ways that it can be done. And my thought process was that there's a lot of families who have the means to copy what I'm doing here. In terms of cost, if you're in a middle-class income situation, this is not outside the realm of achievability. This was not the most expensive thing to possibly do. This is like the most affordable way I could actually pull off delivering this instruction. Kind of proud of how inexpensive this has been. And if you're talking about equipping your children with knowledge and skills that will serve them come what may for the rest of their lives, if you can pull it off, is so worth it, because it's going to keep them busy. They're going to be completely nerded out on the whole thing because it's something cool and different to do. And the reality of it is that I've got as much high-tech stuff around here as I have low-tech stuff around here. If you think I'm going without the internet down here, you're insane, because I have way too many things to do that rely upon it. And so I do have a mobile hotspot down here, and plus Sadly enough, my cell phone actually provides a better mobile hotspot sometimes than the actual mobile hotspot does. What I want to get across is that there really is not a whole lot that I have to adapt to down here in terms of just actual functioning. Because I do have all of my own kitchen stuff that I don't need to put in Sherry's kitchen because she's got her own kitchen stuff, I'm able to utilize a lot of my own personal property down here just to outfit this space so that I can test all these theories out. And yes, there have been things that I've bought that I didn't already have, like my Omnia oven, which I will never shut up about because it's the coolest thing I've ever seen. That I bought for here. And is it like the be-all and end-all of ovens? Certainly not. But does it make a space like this a lot more functional? Absolutely. And so, you know, you guys have already seen some of the stuff I posted along those lines, so I'm not going to belabor it here. But things like that, things that have been proven to work. Bearing in mind that glamping is supposed to be as much like living in a regular house but in a camping context as possible, that I have tried to really modernize and create this space in a way that if hypothetically I were really for sure living here, that I actually could. This is all about proving a point. This is all about gathering data to prove what can and cannot be done. And so I have equipped this space with all the tools that I need to test out all of these hypotheses. There's been a tremendous amount of trial and error, as much research as I've done prior to starting all of this, and the research has been ongoing for several years leading up to this actual project. All of the research in the world only informs your hypothesis. Your hypothesis is not proven until you test it and are shown to be correct. And so a lot of my hypotheses have actually proven to be true. A lot of the research I've done has educated me to the point where once I did the work and once I put all this stuff in, it all panned out the way that I expected it to. No surprises. Other stuff, not so much, and there's been some troubleshooting that I've had to engage in. Sherry and I have had to do some work to figure it all out. I want to make this as real as possible for the purpose of instruction. And so, you know, I put a lot of effort into thinking these things through, and a lot of what you're seeing as far as what I've been posting thus far has been a lot of that trial and error. And, you know, okay, we're going to try this and see how this works. Oh, this isn't working well at all, and we have to upgrade something. And the most obvious things have been the wood-burning stove, the original of which I will never get over how bad that thing is. Whoever the manufacturer was just used regular black paint rather than fireproof paint, and it all cooked off and peeled off and put black particles all over the inside of the tent yurt, which is infuriating, but thankfully I can vacuum. I have the new one, and I have a better one to compare against what I originally got. It's night and day. It's like the original one looks so flim-flam and cheesy and like a toy by comparison. The new one is definitely a lot better. It's a lot more effective, and I'll be talking more about, you know, ways to create heat and prepare food in a space like this as time goes on. So for families who want to do this in their own backyards, if they have the means, this is going to be something that you can use as an at-home teaching tool, whether you were already homeschooling before the shutdown happened or you're inadvertently homeschooling because the shutdown happened. This is going to be something that you can copy if you've got the space and the means. And so we definitely want to, you know, speak to those of you out there who are in a position to do that, understanding fully that a whole lot of you can't. And as such, you're going to have to learn through example, that we're just going to be modeling for you for right now. But that's the beauty of these videos living on the internet for, you know, a long time to come, is that when the day does arrive, when you're able to act on this knowledge and put it to use, you can go back and watch these things in, you know, when you're ready to do it, and all of this is still going to apply. For families who want to replicate this, this is certainly a resource that we think is going to be very valuable. The other thing that we thought about were groups of families that are creating teaching pods for kids. So let's say that you've got one family that may have the space on their property where they could set something like this up, but they're not necessarily in a position to finance every aspect of it. Church yard space would be perfect to do a project like this. And then you can rotate the kids through so they each get a chance to tinker around with stuff, and you don't have to worry about cross-contamination. You know, that you can come in, whether you're a school site or you're a community center, I mean, even like a Boys and Girls Club or a Boys or Girl Scout troop. You know, if you can come up with a place where you can create this so that it benefits multiple people in your immediate circle, where you could do it as a project and you can share the expense, then this can become a teaching vehicle for your kids that you have control over in terms of safety. To the extent that people are looking for these small group activities that they can use that are going to promote learning and give kids something to do that's constructive, that's actually going to benefit them long term, this is again something that you guys can copy, you can replicate using what I'm doing here in my own backyard as an example. So basically that's what we're doing here. That's what this is all about. So we wanted to answer your questions because I know if you've been following Learn and Grow and you've been seeing this stuff being put together and we've been talking about it's coming. This is the explanation of what we're doing and why we're here and why we're doing this particular thing at this time. It's solving a lot of problems for me, both professionally and personally, while also hopefully solving a lot of problems for a lot of other people with respect to sustainable living and food security and how to roll with just the changes that are coming, you know, what's happening right now with the shutdown and being able to respond to the changing world we live in and in a way that's responsible, that's going to not only be healthy and beneficial for you and your family, but it's also going to be instructive and constructive and hopefully preventive that, you know, should things get more difficult, should we get into another situation where there's no food in the grocery stores, should we get into a situation where socioeconomically it doesn't matter how much food is in the grocery stores, nobody has the money to pay for it. Regardless of what comes, if we start building our resources and pulling together our resources now to adapt to what could happen so that we're prepared for it, even if things that bad do not come to pass, which hopefully they won't, just having that sense of preparedness and knowing that you've got a backup plan just gives you so much more peace of mind. And if that backup plan includes a peaceful, beautiful, restful, therapeutic, restorative space that you can go into and just get it together and be in this beautiful bubble where nothing is wrong, there's nothing wrong with creating that for yourself as well. All of these problems get addressed by doing this one thing. We hope that this is literally food for thought for you, that this gives you plenty of things to think about how you can respond to the current circumstances with what you have to work with. And maybe you don't have a backyard where you could pitch a tent. Maybe all you have is a balcony, and all you can do is make some self-watering containers and grow some food. Okay, that's not bad. Let's start there. So regardless of where along this spectrum of solutions we're providing, you're able to step in and start doing something now, we hope to inspire that in you. So maybe it's not going to be as grand of a scale as this. Maybe it's going to be a grander scale. Maybe you have the resources to do something bigger and better than this and expand upon it. And certainly once we get to the tiny house, where instead of recapturing gray water in buckets back by the sink, we're recapturing gray water in tanks from the shower drain and the sink drain and the kitchen and the bathroom of the house that we're going to have, and that's how the gray water is going to end up going into the garden. Well, that's a far more industrialized, self-contained kind of a solution, but it's still environmentally responsible. So right now we're collecting gray water in buckets, but down the road as we get the tiny house, which hopefully you're going to be helping us do because we can't get there without your support, then we'll be able to model a more sophisticated way of recapturing the gray water and putting it in the garden. But bottom line is still the same thing. It's not whether we recapture the gray water, it's how we recapture the gray water. Are we going to do it from a camping shower and a outdoor sink, or are we going to do it from the interior of a tiny house? And so these are the kinds of things that we want to start now on this smaller scale and then work up to with the tiny house as we get to it. It may be that we put the larger solar system in and only connect the tent yurt to it for now, and that's okay, because then once we get the tiny house, we've already got the solar system. So, you know, we're looking at what's the pacing of how we do this, of how we upgrade as time goes on. And really it's going to come down to how much support we get from you guys. Hopefully with your support, we're going to be able to do that. And so again, our GoFundMe link is in our description information below with this post. We really, truly appreciate the support you've already given us. We hope you've enjoyed this introductory video and this basic explanation of what's going on around here and what we're doing in this space. If you have any questions or comments, please post them. You can also email us directly at info@learn-and-grow.org. Reach out to us if you have any questions, if you have any suggestions, if you have any ideas on how to improve upon what I've already done out here. Then definitely, if you have any items that you want to donate, or you want to make a in-kind donation of services or support and you're relatively local to us, or it's something that you can help us out with online, let us know. But primarily, if you can just donate to our GoFundMe to help us get that tiny house going, by the time we get to through the run of this instruction, we'll be ready to take all of this down, put the tiny house in, and then continue the instruction at that enhanced level. And so we really enjoy taking you on this journey with us and you being part of this journey with us. We hope that you find all of this incredibly informative and that we're facilitating a conversation amongst the community of us who want to address these concerns. That this is not one-sided dialogue. This is not just like me putting up a poster and you reading it on a wall. We really want to hear back from you. And we really want to be able to work with you to build this instruction and to give you the information you're looking for. If we can solve the big problems for you out of the gate so that you can start off already from an informed position and then troubleshoot unique to your space from there, that's a hell of a lot easier than you having to start all over from scratch. And we really want to eliminate a lot of that from scratch part of it as much as we possibly can. What we're really experts at here is teaching. And what we're teaching is something that people need to know. By no means do we think we know it all when it comes to sustainability or gardening, and we welcome the experts on those subjects as long as you're willing for us to take what you give us and potentially reframe it in a way that we think is going to have the most instructional success. That expert knowledge from expert gardeners and sustainability experts is really important because I can take the expertise of how to teach and put all that expertise together to come up with something that's new. For the entire species to lose the knowledge of how to survive independently and self-sufficiently is not acceptable. There's no reason for us to lose that knowledge. That's not good for us. That's a really good way to become extinct. Hopefully you'll find this information useful, and if you have any questions, you'll let us know. And if you haven't already, you will subscribe to this or follow us depending on the platform you're on so that you can keep up with our content as it continues to be produced. I know, right? And we look forward to bringing more to you soon. So thank you again for joining us. We appreciate your viewership and your support.